Okay, so this would be the section of the interview where I have like an amazing graphic and
Oh,
like
for
some
sure.
really hip fucking music to
Some
lead
like
us in.
3D title is doing
Yeah.
some sort of thing. why? Why? I don't understand why every single person on YouTube who has their personal channel, they're like, all right, we're gonna use dubstep and this like cool 3D text that's gonna like dance around, and it's every video, and I don't understand. It'll be like, today we're talking about like some dry topic in math, and just this like, what? Did there need to be an explosion there? Like, it's not that serious. I don't understand.
Okay, so we got the big dubstep lead in, and it's like, okay, so I'm Andrew. Welcome to the podcast. This is the first podcast that I'm doing. I've already gotten to know Alyse a little bit, and so here she is. Alyse, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm Alyse. I was gonna say my last name, but I don't know that that matters because no one knows me by it anyway. So we're just gonna stick with Alyse, also
And,
known as at Alyse Awakened on Twitter, or if you're on Parlor, Awakened Alyse, because our first one was taken somehow.
perfect. And so you're working on a project right now.
I am working on a project. Let me open it up because I want to just bask in the glory of what I've done. So the project that I'm working on right now is called the Great Awakening Wiki, or like the Great Awakening Map Wiki, but the logo says Great Awakening Wiki, which is, does what it says on the tin. It's a wiki, it's a media wiki installed for. My goal is for it to be for all of the terms that are on the Great Awakening map, at least to start. Um,
That
and
for a
yeah.
lot of people don't realize that the Great Awakening map is not the same as the Q map, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily tied. And like, see, I think this is something that some people have an issue with, is that they feel like the Great Awakening is kind of following on the coattails of the Q map, and that they're not of the Q movement, and they're not connected. Me personally, I think it's an extra valuable uh, subject matter, and but it's like there's a rift between, let's say, Christian fundamentalist Q followers and sort of the more, I guess, new agey
Yeah.
stuff.
Um, I mean, again, I think that that's one of the wonderful things about this movement is that, and I wish that I could remember like a drop word for word off the top of my head, but like Q has specifically said that like this is not, a movement that's delineated by any sort of like, race, nationality, any of that stuff. Like it's just, do you like love your country, and do you like want to know what the truth is, are pretty much, the underlying things. You can be anyone from anywhere if you're, a curious enough mind and just have the sense that, I am being lied to and I want to know what the actual truth is. So I take umbrage with anyone who, like, you don't have to agree with, you don't have to believe in star seeds and light workers or anything like that to understand that those are still valuable members of our community. And also, like, if we're in the business of questioning everything, like, who are we really to decide, like, oh no, these are the things that are true, and the things that you believe, those are definitely fake. Like, I think that they are because the book that I read says so. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So I take issue with anyone who's trying to sort of fight that battle, um, because ultimately it doesn't matter whether the sentiment came from scripture or from just like a thought you had looking at a sunset. Like, it, as long as it's the same sort of positive message that exists across all, religions more or less. I don't get what the issue is. So,
I totally share the sentiment. There's entire fields of study and schools of thought that I don't agree with, but it's like one thing. What's the one thing we all have in common here is well, there's several, but one of the main ones is that we all feel like we're being lied to,
all right.
and we can all get behind that and say like, hey, can you guys start telling us the truth? And until that point, it's like we don't have to force all our beliefs to fit together. We can, in fact, I feel like let's put aside the ones that don't jive with everyone else. Get to where we agree on something, and just maintain unity. And see, I think that's the fundamental difference between us and them, for lack of a better term, is that
Mm-hmm.
we seek unity. We don't seek conformity, and conformity
Mm-hmm.
is what is destroying creativity. I went to an improv class that changed my life many years ago, where they essentially forced you to make some mistakes, and they
Mm.
cherished them. They stopped and they said, "See, it's not so bad to make mistakes." Um, in improv, you're seeking creativity, and they say one of the biggest killers of creativity is the fear of making a mistake. So they
Mm.
try and push you out to that point and say, "See, it's not so bad." Now that is, if you consider the cancel culture, which is so prevalent
Mm.
in today, it's like, well, there people are trolling through your old tweets and posts and finding something you said that was a mistake and using it as an excuse to destroy you. And so this fear of making a mistake is is hurting our ability to be creative. I'm not sure if I jumped a logical step there.
No, that make because like one thing that I have never understood is like if you don't fundamentally believe that people have the ability to change and grow and learn, then what is the point of any like activist movement or any sort of campaign? Because if you believe that, well, this thing that you tweeted when you were 14 years old, like that's who you are forever, that doesn't jive with like trying to bring awareness to anything or trying to like educate people about anything, because you've already admitted that you don't believe that people can change and learn. So you have to, you have to pick one. Either you think that everyone is just immediately evil in some sort of weird neo Calvinist, like you have been predestined to be canceled, sorry, or you have a more empathetic view, which is okay. So sometimes, like when you're younger, you're a little shit. Like that's just, I for sure am glad that like a lot of the, probably dumb jokes and comments that I made when I was growing up aren't like permanently recorded on the internet. But had they been, that could be the end for something that like that I later decide, oh, that's not funny. Like, that's not a good thing to say or a good thing to believe. I have learned and grown, as all people do and should. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Can you explain what a neo-Calvinist is? I don't
Okay,
know what that term is.
so so Calvinism, I don't know why I got really into reading about like specific subsects of Christianity, but so Calvinists were the group that essentially believed that the like the works that you do don't, like, you can't do good things to earn your way to heaven. Essentially, it's like from the moment that you're born, you're either like destined to go to heaven or you're destined to
Uh,
go to hell. But the way that they sort of which you would think that that would lead to just like, okay, well then anyone can do whatever they want because you're already, it's already set, you don't have to worry about it. But the thing was that they also said that the people who are predestined to go to heaven will behave like better people. So it became this sort of like virtue signaling thing where everyone, despite, regardless of what they actually thought they're like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm destined to go to heaven or hell, but if I act like a good person, then that must mean that I'm one of the
Right.
heavenly ones. And I need everyone else around me to recognize that I'm, not destined to just plummet into hell.
It sounds
So,
pretty circular.
yeah, so Calvinism is like contrasted with, for example, like Catholicism, which is saying, you know, pretty much just like humans are shit to begin with, but like if you do good things and are a good person, then like you kind of level up and are a good person. When you die, you go to heaven. So like there's the ability to actually do something that will fundamentally change your destiny, whereas Calvinism is just like, well, before you were born we already decided, so sucks, I don't know.
Now, both of those seem to be like able to be. There's like runaway interpretations of
Oh,
that
for
where it's
sure.
like, yeah, we'll just leave that at that.
But yeah,
Uh,
but like that's by like neo Calvinism. Essentially, that's what I'm saying is like, well, you said a slur when you were 13, so that's it. That's You are destined to hell, and you cannot be redeemed. Sorry, thanks for playing.
right, right. That it does. That's a pretty good description of modern day cancel culture.
Yeah.
So let me swing back here. Tell me a little bit more about the project you're working on. We know so far. We know it's the Great Awakening map and all the terms on it. It's a giant image board. It's just giant image meme, as the creator would call it,
Yeah.
and he's put like 1,000 different
Yeah, it's
topics into it.
insane.
So what are you doing with that project?
So, I got the idea because I was looking at it, and there were some things that I like. One of the entries on it is just Stanley Kubrick's The Shining with no other context, and I have no idea what that's specifically referring to, or like what context I might be missing, and just like a lot of the other terms that someone will look at it and be like, oh no, I totally know, I know exactly what that thing means, that's like my area of expertise. But someone else would look at it and be like, I don't know, like, what are you talking about, like, let's pick, just like, what do you mean by like solar warden or like free energy? And if you have like, it's the map is great because it gives you places to start, but if you don't even really know what about the thing like to start with, it's kind of hard to get into some of it. And I realized from being on Twitter that everyone's kind of got their own like research focuses, and there's some people that if I ask them questions about star seeds or reptilians, they've got a million websites they can point me to. But someone else like doesn't have any of that, but they do have a lot of stuff on like MK Ultra and things like that. So I was thinking, well, there's not really like a good centralized way for all of us to sort of pool our collective like information that we have about these terms. And I think that that's somewhat of a hindrance to being able to effectively like go down the rabbit hole, as we would say.
Yep.
Because if you are going down the rabbit hole and then you reach something that just you have no frame of reference for, like you just have no context, you have no way to understand it, then like that's that's the end of it, that's a dead end. And I think that that's an issue. And I thought, well, how do I usually like learn things? And if it's just like some completely just some topic I have no idea about, like I'll go to Wikipedia just to see like like I don't know what page I ended up on like the Hindu concepts of time the other day. Like you couldn't, if you asked me to describe that, I would have zero things for you. I would have nothing. That's so out of my frame of reference. But like you go to Wikipedia, and then because the articles have so many other links embedded in them, then like if I'm reading something, I'm like, oh, I don't understand what this concept they're referring to means, let me click on that and read about that. And then the next thing it's like 5 hours later, and suddenly I'm a scholar on like some obscure, like, yes, the Icelandic postal system, I know everything about this now. So and that in itself is like a rabbit hole. So I figured, well, we've got the greatness that is just like going down Wikipedia rabbit holes, and we've got all the terms in the Great Awakening map. So I could probably put these things together, because I know that when I started like really looking into things, that a lot of it was just like, I don't, like, where do I start, how do I even get into this? I'd like go on Twitter and ask, does anyone have any information on this and this, because I just have no concept of where to begin. So my goal with the wiki is to bring together all of the the different just the different knowledge people have, because one of the great things about Wikipedia, right, is that it's collaboratively written and refined. I've been a Wikipedia editor before, because of course I have, and just really like niche specific things. Like I was like, oh, they don't have a very well organized list of every profession that Barbie has ever been. I'm gonna stay up and make that. Why? No fucking reason. But like, because it's knowledge, and because I want it to be accessible, I will contribute that, because that's something I find interesting. So I wanted to bring sort of all of the like collaborative and also rabbit hole sort of aspects of regular Wikipedia and apply it to the Great Awakening map to start, but to just everything we kind of talk about broadly, so that if you're a person who's new to it, new to all of just everything, just you have newly awakened and you're like, what the fuck is going on, that you could go and even just hit the like random page button and just like fall down a rabbit hole, or you look up Illuminati or something, and then you click on further links and you just keep going deeper and deeper, and that facilitates a better, faster awakening. I feel like I'm on an infomercial.
Well, I think, well, I'm certainly on the same page, so to speak, and the whole idea, the whole beauty of online conversation these days is that for every other topic, at least, you can casually talk about it, and you don't have to worry about people knowing what you're talking about, because if they don't know, all they have to do is type it in, and they end up on a Wikipedia page, and they're up to speed. We don't have that for... In the past, we haven't had that for some of these more esoteric topics. So the end game is that we're going to be able to start talking about the subject matter and not worry about having to explain it, and because that kind of bogs down conversation.
Right.
When we have to explain everything every keyword that we mention, it really hinders the conversation.
Because especially, I mean, if you were someone completely outside and you just like looked at any given like Twitter conversation between people in our community, you would, it's just like a laundry list of like, what the fuck does that mean? What the fuck does that mean? Like, what is that word? And if in order to engage with that, you would have to like go through the process of explaining to an outside person, okay, well, this is what the reptilians are up to, and like this is what's happening on Saturn, and like this is like what like all of these things that are just they're such huge topics in and of themselves, that like to try and give someone a rundown of it so they understand is almost impossible.
And we see the same thing happening when you have the same problem arising when you're talking with someone who's adversarial, someone who's, in some cases, like we'll talk about paid shills. Like, one of their tactics is to bog you down in explanations. They'll throw something out, and you'll spend the next 5 minutes disagreeing or proving them wrong, and then they'll move on. They won't even acknowledge that you've given valid information on something, and that is a tactic. The idea of throwing off the train of thought.
It's the same thing that like lawyers do, at least in lawyer shows. I don't know exactly how it works, but like, they'll have something and they'll just bring in like just a U-Haul full of boxes of evidence that you have to like look through, because their whole tactic is like, well, if we just swamp you in all of this, you can't possibly like parse all of it, and we'll just kind of walk away while you fall over yourself trying to understand what we just gave you.
Auditors, like when an auditor comes into
Mm.
a company, they'll just throw a bunch of boxes at you, like you said. So that's great. That's great. How's it coming so far, the project?
So I have been, I mean, it's going well, with the caveat that it is extremely difficult for me to get other people to contribute. I and like there's a couple articles that I like did like write myself, like, or at least did the research to pull things together. But there's been a couple that, like, last night I just exported from a different wiki that had the information and imported it as a basis, because I can't possibly, like you said, there's at least like 1,000 things on the Great Awakening map. I can't personally write all of those articles because I don't know what I'm talking about with the vast majority of them. I can't, like, so I've been doing a lot of work on the back end to try and make things more accessible and easy to use. Like, I made there be a visual editor so you don't have to understand how, like, wiki code works for formatting things. But in terms of the actual articles, I don't like the number of active pages that have information I can fit on the front page, because it's not that, I mean, it's a decent number of things, but it's not anywhere near, all the terms on the Great Awakening map, which is my at least preliminary goal. So it's going okay. The wiki itself is pretty. It works. There's some things on it, but I'm having a hard time getting other people to contribute, which kind of fucks with my grand vision of everyone, like, pooling their knowledge.
And I'll jump in here and say this is one of the first things. This is one of the first things that we talked about, was the idea, like, I will totally contribute. I will come in and we'll do this together. And as you know, I have done absolutely zero, and it's something that I find important, and yet I have not got my finger out and contributed to it. And I've seen you frustrated with this with other people, not other people that I can point to, but
Yeah.
just the community in general. Everybody, I'm sure there's lots of people who think that this is a valid way to spend your time, a valid way to contribute. There's people out there who say, "Oh, I just don't know how to contribute," and this is a great idea, but I haven't done so. So why do you think that is? Why do you think it's hard? People are hitting walls when it comes to contributing to this.
So I think that maybe part of it, and this is going to be entirely just me spitballing, because if I knew the answer, obviously I would have tried to do something about it. But I think part of it, at least, is like when you look at like any given Wikipedia article, it's like, it's really well formatted. Like, there's so many sources. It's like, the grammar is perfect. Everything is like really professional and put together. And so if you're kind of coming at it with the thought that, like, well, I'm not good at writing, or I'm not like a professional who writes sentences well, or whatever, or I'm not, whatever it is that you don't think that you can make something up to that standard. I think that that's probably what a lot of people are thinking. That, like, what I'm asking is, like, okay, who wants to volunteer to, like, fully write the Illuminati article and cite all your sources and, like, put in all these headings and, like, write 10,000 words? And that would, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, no, fuck this. I will do literally anything but that. I do not feel capable. But I don't think that people, because we rarely see, like, a Wikipedia page that's, like, under construction, essentially.
Right.
We
Yeah.
only see, like, the shiny finished one. But if you look at, like, any of the, like, talk pages on Wikipedia, it's like different editors talking about, like, oh, well, I think we should add this, or, like, here's why we should get rid of this. And it's just a mass of people who are all working on it. So it doesn't start out super professional and super shiny and well sourced. It's the collective efforts of a bunch of people. But I don't think that a lot of people, like, have an idea of that sort of the place where, like, a Wikipedia article starts.
And that comes to what comes to mind there is that on the on the original Wikipedia, you'll find in articles you'll have a point, and then at the end of it there's like a hot link that says citation needed, which means someone has added something and they have no evidence for it, but it's still up there for people to ingest. So is that something you're okay with too? Is just people who like that they don't need to actually provide sources or prove it, they can just put in like, this is what I heard about the subject?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, one, we're not. Oh, I'm not holding it to the same standard, because Wikipedia has like, you know, specific standards of credibility and all the whatever. But obviously, like, you know, the kind of research that we're doing, a lot of that stuff would flunk Wikipedia's, you know, definition of what credible is or whatever, to begin with. So we're not holding it to the same standard. So like, if you just, you know, like, and a lot of the articles already have like, there's no sources in it, because the idea is that we need to get like the ideas down. And this is something I personally struggle with as a writer. I don't write like first drafts because I don't like having something that's not fully done and perfect. So I instead like will just write a final draft like painstakingly. So this is something I also need to work on. But like, if you just put, you know, like Frazzle Drip is a video, it's on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and it shows Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin doing fucked up things. If that was like the only sentence that you know, wrote, that's perfect. That's fine. Because then the next person who looks at that will go, oh, actually, I can elaborate on this, or actually, I have like a great article that talks more about this that I can link to, and so on and so forth. But until there's something on the page, there's nothing to build from.
Right. And you know, I see these topics being built up and threaded out in you know, Twitter conversation threads, but then they disappear, you know, because Twitter is very temporal.
Yeah.
We need this stuff to be permanent, so it's accessible, you know, at a search with a search key.
Yeah, that's part. There is I'm gonna make sure that I get the name right, because I want to give this person credit. At Discover Truth Zero has a bunch of great threads that I used for the first like handful of articles, were basically just me copy and pasting, with their blessing, me copy and pasting like the, you know, unrolled version of their threads, because it was just a lot of good information. And I don't know shit about red-haired stasis giants. Like, that's not something I know anything about.
Me neither.
But there was but this person did a thread on it, and I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna put that in there so that, you know, someone else who comes upon this can go through it and see like, oh, well, you know, this needs to be fixed, and like, that doesn't really make sense, or whatever. Someone who that's like their topic, you know, they can come and build off of that. But
so that like, would be okay too, if someone has a thread that they've put, they can just copy and paste that in.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's honestly that's where I've been getting like a lot of things, because that's where a lot of that was part of like why I wanted to make this, is because it's so unless you're like already following specific people and you happen to like catch their tweet like at the time that they're making it, so it's on your timeline, you're not going to see like so many of these very in-depth threads that are like the best source of information. But it's so, if you don't know what to look for, you're not going to find them. And I think that it's important that people be able to sort of just stumble into information rather than having to search for something that they don't know to search for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, you know, considering that, you know, we're all on our different timelines, yeah, someone who's wakes up in a week from now and says, I want to learn about this stuff, you can't go to Twitter because it's all gone. So
right, exactly.
Okay, so it's starting to sound a lot better the more we talk about this.
Getting a little less afraid of it.
Yeah. Hopefully this will at least get me to start copying and pasting some of my stuff in there. Because it's the thing, like, I feel like I have so much to contribute, and it's just, but it's kind of all up in the air. We're all atomized, you know. We just we don't have as much cohesiveness as we could have. Okay. You know what else I noticed that there was you posted that someone did a under an under they
Ooh, I'm
you know what
so.
I'm
Yes. Okay. So I forget how I noticed it at first, but some person who wasn't logged in, so someone who didn't bother like making an account on there, basically deleted all of the adrenochrome article and then just replaced it with the like definition of adrenochrome from the National Institutes of Health, because I don't know where I don't know where this person found this project because it's still very much in its infancy, but found it and decided, no, I must correct the record on adrenochrome. Everything that you're saying is fake, and I'm gonna just delete everything and just cite the definition. Well, okay, that helps no one, because first of all, the project isn't aiming to be the arbiter of truth. I'm trying to just gather all of the like it's you know, you're not gonna find the ultimate truth from the Great Awakening wiki. The point is that all of the different topics that you might want to dig more deeply into or like research more for yourself, like you should, to make it easier for you to find like different related topics or like things that, you know, maybe you're interested in, or, you know, things that you disagree with or don't believe in. But to just be like, no, adrenochrome is this chemical compound and it does this, like, all right, sure, anyone could fucking Google that. The whole point is that the rest of the story isn't being told, and fuck off. In conclusion, I was very
my immediate
frustrated.
intuition on that was like, okay, this is a paid
Yeah, I just
disinformation agent.
I was so irked because like even if you saw yourself as like correcting the record or like doing whatever, why like
This is the Great Awakening map. This is not a place for
right,
giving
like
definitions.
even if you completely 100% don't believe in any of it, even if you're like, you know, some like leftist who's like looking on in mockery, I would hope that it would at least, you know, you would look at that and be like, well, this is still interesting if I want to understand what these people are that I'm, you know, making fun of, what they're talking about or what they're referring to, because I want to know. Like, there's no harm being done by just creating an encyclopedia of like the things that we talk about, the things that we look into. I don't understand
Well,
why. Yeah.
you have to realize that that is harm to the people that this is undermining. Like the whole corrupt establishment, the satanic cabal. This does threaten them.
It's just wild because again, it's just like my little personal domain that I bought, and like I've been making most of the things. Like someone that went way out of their way, like, no, this is not acceptable. Why? You know, what are you doing? Like, go on DuckDuckGo, search adrenochrome, you'll find a billion other things. Like, I don't know what you thought you were doing by changing my editable encyclopedia.
So
It's
I
just
want to ask, did you find this by accident, or do you have like an update stream that shows?
so there's a recent changes page that I look at because when I like I'm still in the process of importing, like sometimes I'll like import some templates from like main Wikipedia that I want to use, like templates for citations or like other little helpful things, and I import it through the server like command line, and then I go and I have to check like, okay, did this like publish, like did this get imported, and I just notice that because it shows you like what page was changed, and then it'll say like in parentheses like plus 500 or like minus 80, and that's how many words were changed. So like added 500 or like got rid of 80 words. And I just noticed that like the adrenochrome one had, it was like, you know, minus 6,000. I was like, what the
Oh my
fuck is
gosh.
this? Like, what do you, why?
So, as this project grows, like it sounds like you're going to need help
I'm
monitoring that, or are you going to be fine doing it
I'm
yourself?
so so there's I'm still kind of So I guess if anyone's interested in the technical side, it's a media wiki install that I just have on my domain that I registered. But I'm still learning a lot of like I edited a bunch of pages yesterday, and then it had a little thing at the bottom to say like mark this edit as patrolled. So that was like, oh, I didn't know that that was a thing, but that's for, if there's like me or people I've essentially deputized to like see if this edit is legit or if this is just like some shill, messing with my stuff. That you can mark it as patrolled and say like, no, this is fine, this checks out. So I'm still learning about a lot of the tools for editing and sort of, I don't want to say policing, but like just looking on and making sure things are going okay. Because the Wikipedia itself obviously has millions of people that are contributing to it, and they have a really robust sort of system of how different editor permissions, or locking articles if they've been vandalized a lot, and all these different things that I'm still kind of poking into and seeing about. But I would like for it not to be the case that you have to be logged in to add things.
I think it should be though, because if it seems obvious to me that if and when this takes off, it's going to be a prime target for undermining.
Yeah, and also it's just kind of it's cool to me because you can see you can go to somebody's little wiki profile thing and see what pages they've contributed to, and that's interesting to me because it'd be interesting if someone's got the same sort of research focus as you, and then that's someone you could potentially strike up a conversation with about some of that stuff that you're both researching.
Right, so it could be like a networking tool as well.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, it's sad that I can't trust just the average not logged in person to not ruin things, because I try my best to I want people to be able to be as anonymous as they feel like they need to be, because and since this is an audio medium, people wouldn't immediately know this, but I will never show my face on anything. I have one profile picture that I use because it's already indexed, and otherwise I'm so deeply troubled by facial recognition and AI that I just won't show my face anywhere. So I want people to be able to engage at whatever level of anonymity that they feel that they need to,
right,
but
right.
Also it was a couple of just random IP addresses that fucked up one of the pages, so I guess we'll see. I guess, and it's not like you have to confirm your identity or anything. You just have to make up a username. So, yeah.
I want to say too, Champ, the guy who created the actual map, he's taken off big time on Instagram. He's got 130,000 followers, and he's famous in his own right. And I'll say it, you're not in collaboration with him, but I've let him know. I chatted with him a little bit here and there, and he was blown away when he found out that you were making this. And I know I sent you some screenshots of the conversation I had. He loves the idea, and he does not hold any proprietary grip on this project. In fact, this is exactly what he wanted. He wanted this to evolve into a community of contribution. So if anybody again feels like, oh well, I don't really feel like I have any stake in this. We do. We all have stake in this. This is an open source, free project.
And full disclosure, let's see, how long have I've only had my Twitter for a couple months, because I had mostly just been sort of hovering and looking at threads people would send me, but I wasn't actually actively on Twitter until I I don't need to get into why. Just suffice it to say, there's a lot of people who were in my life who are no longer in my life, and I am probably better for it. But yeah, I've only been like on Twitter interacting with people for like a couple of months, and I just cracked 1,000 followers. Like, I'm not
Congratulations.
thank you so much. I'm not some, like, deeply entrenched, like, person who's been there since the beginning. Like, there's plenty of people who are, but I'm not, and I'm fine with that. Like, I'm fine with being, a relative newcomer who is just, like, real excited about knowledge and research, and I want to make things better. So, like, if you think, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, or like, I barely understand this, like, I don't know what I'm talking about 100,000% of the time. I truly, if search engines didn't exist, I would just be like sitting in the middle of the floor sucking my thumb. Like, I don't know what. I know nothing. I have no divine, like, information. This is all new stuff to me, well, more or less, and like, even if you just contribute, and if you write something that's just like patently false, then someone else will come along, ideally, and amend it and correct it. So there's not, unless you're actively going out of your way to sabotage pages, there's not really a way to, like, do it wrong.
What we're witnessing right now, as Q says, we are the news now. I think we're transitioning towards that, where there's this monumental shift of power away from localized to decentralized,
Mm-hmm.
and we're deprogramming. We've been conditioned our entire lives to defer to authority,
Mm-hmm.
and what we're starting to realize is that authority is unfounded. It's undeserved, and it's there's corruption that has festered because of our voluntary deferral to these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially, so somebody that I personally consider like a martyr and a patron saint, if ever, is Aaron Schwartz, who uh, officially committed suicide after he had, like, downloaded and released for free a bunch of articles from academic journals on JSTOR, which, like, if you either have access to the JSTOR database through, like, your university, or you have to pay, like, something, I don't remember how much, but something obscene, to get access to all of these journals. And his whole thing was, well, why do you get to guard all of the world's knowledge? Like, this should be free. And so he broke I don't know if it was copyright or whatever, but the case they brought against him would have put him in jail for like a decade or
Oh my
something.
god.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not getting this story messed up, because I don't want to
Do you think he
him.
committed suicide, or was there foul
There's
play?
like, so there are, I haven't looked into it super deeply, but I do know that there's like some murmurings that it may have not been a suicide, which let's see, let me make sure that, okay, activism.
I've been
Oh.
hearing the same thing, that all across, the patent process is corruption manifest in itself, and that if you try and create, that there's been slews of people, for instance, trying to push their own different projects for free energy, and if you push too hard, you got to knock on the door. You
Yeah,
know?
what's like the most upsetting example of that is that there are certain strains, like certain seeds and like certain strains of organisms that are patented, and there's been a lot of outcry because it's like there'll be some sort of seed that was like developed by or cultivated by like the farmers in India or something to like specifically be resistant to their kind of their weather and environment, or like some specific way that they've bred these plants so that they either will like yield more food or just like survive better in the climate. And then got companies that come in and they are like, oh, nice, that's a good idea, I'm gonna patent that, so if you want this thing that you made that we took, you have to pay us a bunch of money. And that's like, that's obscene to me. It's you can't, like, patenting life is so dystopian to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Did you find the
yeah.
article?
So this is interesting. So before I think it's before the JSTOR thing, and many people will probably be familiar. So, Aaron Swartz had downloaded 2.7 million federal court documents stored in Pacer.
Hmm.
And
And Pacer is
Pacer is the public access to court electronic records database.
okay.
The administrative office of the U.S. courts like manages it, and it's where a great deal of people in our community will like dig through stuff on Pacer because that's like
That's where all the sealed indictments are
yeah,
too, right?
yeah. That's where a lot of like the first uh this most recent like wave of Ghislaine Maxwell, like all of those court documents, like that's pulled straight from Pacer because
Okay.
Pacer is where they have all these things filed. But again, you have to have a subscription to Pacer to access it. So Aaron Swartz was like, well, fuck that. I think this should all be available for free. And then the FBI was like, huh, we don't like that because this is technically government property.
Wow.
And they the FBI in that case did not press charges because the documents were in fact public. So they had no case.
Hmm.
But then a couple years later, when he was at MIT, he was just downloading like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles from JSTOR, which is again, it's just like a database of academic journals and research. And he was just downloading so much that it was affecting the performance of the site. Um, and then, yeah, so they blocked the IP address, and then another IP address on the same network was just like, okay, downloading hundreds and hundreds. And so JSTOR temporarily blocked all of MIT from accessing it, which is wild. And then they let's see. Yeah, so he was arrested like a few months later by MIT police and the Secret Service, which is insane to me because again, it's just like I've used JSTOR for reading about like Victorian theater and just nerd shit. It's just academic journals. It's not like classified government intel. But he was indicted on state charges of breaking and entering with intent, grand larceny, and unauthorized access to a computer network. And his let's see, they were so they like kept piling on all these felony counts. Prosecutors offered to recommend a sentence of 6 months in a low security prison if he would plead guilty to 13 federal crimes, and they were like, no, we're going to trial. Are you joking? Like, what are you? Absolutely not. And like a couple years later, when this was still all like ongoing, he allegedly killed himself. And that's like it's so obscene to me that the Secret Service had anything to do with this, because it's just uh yeah, JSTOR is a digital library founded in 1995, originally containing digitized back issues of academic journals. Also has books and primary sources and current journals, and that's it. It's just a place with journals. And Aaron Swartz rightly thought, well, this shouldn't be guarded behind this like
Hmm.
ridiculous paywall, because knowledge is like it's a fundamental human right to have access to information. And they were trying to charge him with 13 felonies, and the Secret Service came after him. Like, it's absurd.
I see a very strong parallel between science and knowledge. Okay, there's three. There's science and the scientific institution. There's knowledge and the academic institution, and we have the third one is just communication and the mainstream media machine. That all of these, there's the decentralized version, and then there's the authoritative version.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people aren't able to delineate the difference in terms of the science, where we think when we have someone speaking out against a scientific institution, skeptics will equate that as like, oh, well, they don't believe in science. That's not true. Uh, the science as a practice is a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
mind frame that has helped us so much. But what's happening is there's people who have taken control of it,
Mm-hmm.
and they've acted as gatekeepers and controlling the dissemination in order to fit their own agenda.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things, and I don't remember if that was on this recording or before that I mentioned it, but like, there's the issue. One of the biggest issues in like scientific research is the lack of replication. So like, as at least I learned in science class in school, like you do an experiment and then you have to like repeat the experiment to make sure that those findings are the same findings that you got before, to make sure that that wasn't just a one-off fluke. But the problem that science as like an industry is having is that it's easy to get funding for new research, but it is impossible to get funding for research that just like is to replicate a prior experiment, because they want, like, obviously they'll fund things that are going to get published in journals, and then things that are seen as contributing something new to the scientific sphere. But the fundamental thing that confirms experiments, which is replication, you can't get funding for it. So you've got all of these studies, money pouring into like first studies that are groundbreaking, and then there's no follow-up because there's just not the money for it. And so that's how you get a lot of like really clickbaity articles about some new scientific whatever, and then it's like, yes, this is based on like one preliminary study they did on 6 people in Saskatchewan somewhere, and it's they'll run away with it because that's all they have to go on. So the idea that like just because you weren't published in some big name journal means that the science doesn't check out is absurd, because the fact that you are published in a big name journal could equally mean the science doesn't check out because no one has attempted to repeat your experiment. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. Just that, in the way that like the mainstream media will cover like new quote unquote scientific discoveries, and like the way that they'll misrepresent things, because obviously the talking heads are not reading like the whole of the research. They're not going to go through your 400-page like physics dissertation and then understand it and then try to relay that to the audience. What they get is basically like the Daily Mail blurb about it, and then they just repeat that because like, oh well, no, that sounds legit, and it'll completely like misrepresent what the study was actually about, because there's not scientific literacy, and we don't seem to really crave, as like a society, obviously there's but we don't seem to crave like the actual facts when they're not glamorous, like
And that's one of the things I was taught in university was that the importance of peer review, and which you see in these journals, is you'll have someone come out with some data, and you'll have a bunch of scientists within the field either confirm or deny the findings and the validity of the findings. And again, I draw a parallel to big news networks, where you can have someone come out. You have, let's say, something. I'll use Wayfair as an example, because Wayfair, everyone was up in arms about it. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone was asking what the heck is going on with this thing, until it got quote unquote peer reviewed by big business media. Everyone came out and said, well, no, it's bullshit for this reason and this reason, and it just essentially got shut down. because of the peer review. And there was a lot of people who are upset about that because they point to that peer review as being invalid. They're saying, well, Snopes said it wasn't true because Wayfair said it wasn't true,
Right.
therefore it wasn't true. And so what I really want to communicate to people is that we need to break through. We need to look at scientific review the same way we're looking at the disillusioned lens that we're looking at mainstream media in.
Yeah, I mean, like, because this is one of the cases where like a term that has a very specific meaning, in this case peer review, is like taken and misinterpreted by people who are not, like, don't understand that that is, like when people like how the word hypothesis in like a science context has a very specific meaning, but like in lay people's terms, hypothesis is just like something that, I don't know, I think might be the case. But like in science, a hypothesis is, it's like rigorous, it's like based on, it's structured in a certain way, it's based on actual like information and not just something you came up with. But with peer review, you hear the words, you're like, okay, it's reviewed by your peers. Well, sure, but in the science context, it's like, who are the peers that are reviewing it? It's not just any person. It's not just people who are, just your like grandma. Just, hey, check out this research I did. What do you think? Like, that sounds legit. Okay, thanks, grandma. Cool. It's peer reviewed. Like, that's not how it works. But
Also, there's another case where it's like the people reviewing. There's a lot of reasons that they could have bias when they're reviewing, and there's several big names in the community who have said in the past couple of weeks for one of the main reasons that there could be bias is scientists are just able to be bought off as politicians. So that's one reason. But on the more basic, pragmatic end of the spectrum, is that your research could be undermining their research, and they're getting funding, and they're getting their bread and butter, they're getting the roof over their head based on their field of study. And if your research undermines that flow of revenue, of money, of funding, your research threatens their livelihood.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's more than enough reason for them to say your research is bogus.
Yeah,
So it's not some shiny, beautiful, perfect system.
right. Like if I mean, one, there's a Wikipedia article called "Funding Bias" that's about exactly this. But two, if you have like, if you're hearing this and think like, well, but it's science, the scientists can't be corrupted. Okay, let me point you to all of the research, quote unquote, that was funded by the tobacco industry in the 40s and 50s that said like cigarettes are good for you. We should be smoking cigarettes for asthma. That was a thing. That was an actual thing we had in hospitals. People would be giving asthma cigarettes because the research was saying, well, this is a thing that's true. And there's a lot of like industry fronts that will fund the kind of research that's favorable to whatever their industry is, and that's a huge, like, any, take with a grain of salt any time any like major corporation says that research proves that their thing is good because this reason. Like, look into, okay, what was this study, who was funding it, and
Right.
more than half of the time it's going to be like, Exxon funded this study into why oil is good for ducks or whatever. Like, okay, of course you did that. Of course your research that you paid for is going to say the thing that you already wanted us to believe. That doesn't mean, even if it's published in a journal, that doesn't mean that it's credible or good. Like, there's, this isn't a conspiracy. Like, again, the tobacco industry, just have a field day.
There's a more contemporary example is the study the study that was proven false or illegitimate on the lack of efficacy of hydroxychloroquine was posted in a journal that was sponsored by a company that had a stake in vaccines for hydroxychloroquine. So even at the surface level, there's signs of corruption in this field.
Yeah, so when we say question everything, we fucking mean it. Like, literally everything. Everything, because anywhere, especially anywhere that money changes hands, someone somewhere is gonna be taking that and like, you know, misusing it. Like,
So this actually leads me into a question that I wanted to ask at the start. We never got to it. You're obviously quite an intelligent person. I
oh,
can
thank
obviously
you.
tell. And but at some point, everyone in the community has had a breakthrough discovery, a red pill, so to
Hmm.
speak, where it's like, okay, well, I actually have to go back and look at everything again because this doesn't fit in the tapestry woven for me.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if you have an exact anecdote
I think I
of what it
do.
was that
I
broke
think I
through for you.
might. So when I, and this is like, we're gonna go way back. When I was like, I don't know, like 11 or 12, or I don't want to do, I'm not going to try and do math live right now, but during, like, I was young during the Bush administration, and I, like, I'm trying to, I don't remember specifically, like, how I started getting into things, but I know that like in fourth grade we had to do this like ceramic project that every side of the little box you made had to represent like something about you, and one of my sides was just like drop of oil equals drop of blood, and like I was like 12 or something, and my
Wow.
bedroom was just covered in like just, you know, shit about how Bush was like, you know, had gotten us into this war for the wrong reasons. And I don't know how I like got into that. It honestly, you know what? It was probably when I was growing up. I used to watch The Daily Show a lot, because it was on Comedy Central, but wasn't like South Park, because I
Mhm.
wasn't really into South Park. But I was like, huh, this is, you're like looking at things in politics, but you're like talking shit about them and like making jokes about it, but also like you're still talking about the things that are happening, and that uh I was amused by it, but then also like, oh yeah, no, these are good points. Like, this is all, everything is nonsense. All of this is nonsense. Um and so I think that that was really like my first sort of like foray into questioning things, was just growing up in the Bush years. And we all saw the like mission accomplished banner and all the hurrah and everything, and then just hearing like a dissenting voice saying like, hey, so just because the president is saying things, it doesn't actually mean that those things are true. And I
Wow.
just got really, yeah, I don't know, I was a dorky little kid,
No,
but
I say wow because it's looking back. It seems like despite it being a dissenting view, that they were still part of the establishment, so to speak. And it's something as simple as that could have triggered it for you.
yeah, like just I was 12, 13. Of course I'm watching Comedy Central because that's what I would be doing anyway. It was just the fact that the Daily Show with Jon Stewart was on, and I was like, huh, this is funny, but also I think you're right, and that's weird. Why? And then I start thinking like, well, why is it that this like the like quote unquote like fake show, like the pretend, we're gonna say pretend news show, predates fake news, but like, this comedy show that's like styled in the format of a news show, but it's funny and it's like purposely riffing on news shows. Why is this where the dissenting opinion is coming from, and then everything else is just propaganda and just promoting whatever the talking points are? And that was kind of my first foray into, oh, huh, so despite having 24 hours in a news cycle, you can devote exactly none of it to criticism.
Well,
Interesting.
it reminds me too that by the end of that comedy news era, it was apparent and it was making headlines that more people were going to Colbert and Daily for their news.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because that was like, those were the only, like, even if they were taking their like comedic takes on it or whatever, it's like just the fact that you're like comedically challenging something, that was still like pretty just unheard of at the time. You know, it was like stand up comedians could, you know, sort of like make references to things, but it wasn't like every night, like up, you know, current news stuff that they're just digging into, which was more than, you know, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, any of them were doing.
Yeah,
uh
you know what I've realizing? They've axed that. They've ended comedy, like satire commentary on current events. They don't do it anymore.
yeah, it's
I
I
think it was more effective, and people, like you said, I mean, it can be something so simple as an intelligent dissenting viewpoint can be enough for people to say what's going on here, even if it's
yeah.
meant as a joke.
Yeah, and like I know that this may challenge my conservative bona fides, but like I still kind of like I follow what John Stewart's doing, just because it was such like a formative voice when I was growing up. And there's a great video of, I think it's him on back when Tucker Carlson was on MSNBC, and John Stewart is on there and debating Tucker Carlson, and it's like some of the most just like fiery, impassioned, like good debate that I've seen in a long time. Not, you know, none of the like just straw men and like fake whatever that, you know, you usually see on TV. It was like really good substantive debate, and you know, we there's nothing like that now.
Oh yeah, like constructive debate is dead.
Yeah, it's
I haven't seen it. I'll get you to link that to me. I'd like to watch it
oh
if
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's good.
It's great. It's great. And also it's just, you know, it's very I don't remember what year they did it, but it was like very like peak early 2000s, just which I don't know. I have a weird sort of fondness for those years, cuz things were just like more clear cut, I think. Like, you know, Bush was telling a bunch of lies. Dick Cheney was pulling all the strings. Like, you know, clearly they'd been like tipped off about Al Qaeda months in advance and did nothing. Like, it was very transparently just going in to take oil and do like all of the things. You know, were just very like, ah, yes, I can see the corruption there. That makes sense to me. Like, that's concrete. And I don't know, it seems like simpler times, I guess.
Can I share my red pill story?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, this is cool. I have family in America. I'm actually from Toronto, Canada, but I have family in Chicago, and also in Florida and Virginia in the mountains. They had a retirement. The grandfather. I don't want to triangulate my position so much today. Probably should edit that out. But I had my grandfather had a next door neighbor who was ex-CIA. He was a CIA analyst, and the story with him was that he was given forced retirement, where they gave him millions of dollars to just leave because, just as a side note, what the CIA does is that when they feel like they're about to, by the way, the CIA is the most corrupt of all the
Yeah.
intelligence agencies. And whenever they're about to be audited or subpoenaed by the U.S. government, everybody who's involved in the sensitive material, anyone who knows the sensitive material, they get axed. And it's like, sorry, you got to go, because people who no longer work for the intelligence agency cannot be subpoenaed and give incriminating evidence against the intelligence agency. So it comes in waves. At any time the government is getting close to interviewing and uncovering the dirty truth, everyone gets thrown out and they hit a brick wall. And it's like, what's one of the reasons the CIA is so hard to clean is because they just can't get any information out of these people, not legally at least. So what happened was this guy got axed and he retired sitting on a bunch of money, and he's just not ever allowed to talk about what happened. So just as a primer, that this guy knew some shit, right? And I was about the same age. I think I was 12, 13, something like that. And he's just he'd come over, he'd have tea, he'd have dinner, and he took a liking to me, and he would in retrospect, he was like trying to tell me stuff. He'd just say, he'd give me these little seeds. For one of them, for one example, he said, "You know, Andrew, we don't know what creativity is. Well, we try and research it. We don't know what it is."
Hmm.
And me, little 12-year-old, he's like, "Okay, whatever, uncle." But there were several instances like that where he was just trying to break me out of the matrix, so to speak. The one that did it was we were at dinner. This time it was in Florida, I believe, because they both shared summer and winter homes. And he said to me, he leaned in across the dinner table, and it was such a powerful memory in retrospect, but it was so casual at the time. He was saying, you know, they found a map. Christopher Columbus sailed across the sea with a map of Antarctica, except it wasn't the ice. It wasn't the shoreline of ice as we know it now. It was actually the shoreline of the land, like 100 kilometers beneath the ice, or 10
Huh.
kilometers, however much. And I actually could look it up now. It's the P map Antarctica. It's actually the Piri Reis map.
Huh.
There's even a Wikipedia page on it,
Ooh.
where it was essentially impossible for this map to be in existence, because the Antarctica has been under ice for thousands and thousands of years.
Huh.
So where the heck did he get this map from? And he did not offer me an answer. He just brought it up, and he went on his merry way as, you know, the mysterious, you know, holder of wisdom that an ex-CIA analyst would be. And that, for me, it's what it is it's a piece of information that it's this puzzle piece that it doesn't have anywhere it fits in the puzzle. And you can't I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't throw the piece out. And what happened was it contaminated the whole tapestry of lies that has been, you know, sown and fed to me over the years. And anyway, so that's just the one that did it for me. And I think the importance to show the difference between our two stories and the difference of other people's stories is that it's not, you know, this red pill isn't going to work for everybody. Yours isn't going to work for everybody. But there's something out there for everyone. That it's just a puzzle piece that doesn't fit, that leads you down the proverbial rabbit hole.
That's such a. I love that analogy because, you know, the instinct would be like, well, if I've got this puzzle that's it's entirely complete except for this one spot, but the puzzle piece I have doesn't fit, well, maybe I throw away the puzzle piece, or maybe I, like, you know, reshape this puzzle piece so it fits. But the actual solution is, well, no, maybe you should figure out which puzzle that piece fits to. That's
Yeah,
just, I love that.
yeah, and I think that also you highlight the importance of choice in that. Is that so many people, I've tried to talk to them about different things, and they choose, and you know, I don't even hold it against them. If the free will is such an important aspect of this reality, that if people aren't ready or they just don't want to, they don't have to believe, and they don't have to take that and run with it. And I think a lot of frustration can be assuaged. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but a lot of us are so frustrated that we're not getting through to people across the aisle, so to speak. We don't have to be. You know, it's the beauty of creation that people are allowed to live their life how they want. And that being said, though, that things are changing at the same time.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've at least found, because another fun fact about things I'm doing, I'm deep undercover in a couple of Antifa.
I heard, that's amazing.
In a couple of Antifa like group chats, because I just, whatever, I want to know things. Obviously, I made a whole wiki, like, I want knowledge.
That's so cool.
So, like, one thing that I've noticed is there's certain, there's certain commonalities that either side will, you know, like, come up with sort of a plausible explanation, but, like, underlying it. So, for example, like, drug prices. Like, we can both sides can agree that, like, you know, people should be able to afford their insulin. Like that's, and that it's a problem that people can't afford insulin. Now, what the reasoning behind that is, like, that might differ, depending on, like, if your view on big pharma and insurance companies and various other things that feed into that. But that basic fact of, like, it's upsetting that my relative can't afford their life-saving medication. That there are certain, I think that a lot of the problem with, like, why we're so divided is that we get really hung up on sort of the specific, like, what explanation we believe to be behind a certain thing, and then arguing about, like, well, you don't agree that this is the explanation, well, so, I discount everything you're saying, rather than, like, okay, so we don't have to agree on why it's happening, but, like, we can at least talk about whatever the central fact is, and, acknowledge, yeah, we both agree this is fucked, and we need to do something. We don't necessarily agree on that something, but I don't see a lot of, like, people really on either side being willing to sort of put aside whatever, semantics or whatever their specific thing is, to kind of get to the heart of issues.
Yeah, there's so many layers of worldview that get in the way,
Yeah.
and I'm of the opinion that we're 95 of us are on the exact same page of what we really want as the end game, where a lot of us have some vision of a utopia as an end game. It's just that how we get there, and we're like a what's the word, a death rattle disagreement about is, but it's like, guys, we all just want the same thing for the most part. I mean, there are some who hail Satan, and it's like we're not gonna be hailing Satan at the end of this, but for 95% of us otherwise are could be in agreement if we could just get politics out of it.
Yeah.
And government structures, like, why does government structure have to be the central talking point of how do we get to a utopia? It seems obvious that we have to talk about it, but I think it's not as central as it needs to be. It doesn't need to be as central as it is.
Yeah, like, the number of, like, I mean, I enjoy some good-natured just talking shit about Democrats, as much as the next person. But, like, like, in my day-to-day life, I don't feel acutely, like, impacted by, like, what, the DNC planning structure is. Like, I don't care.
And you know what else here? It we could easily be having this exact conversation as communist anarchists.
Yeah.
Like, it's that, like, I've read some of these threads, and these people are not different. We're not different.
Yeah.
We've been taught that there's no crossing the rift, but without actually crossing the rift, we could just as easily exist on that end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and that's another, like, just from, like, observing the, first of all, the people in the Antifa chats, it's mostly memes, I have to say. But, like, there's, that there are good points being made, and I know that that's, like, verboten to express that, like, anyone aligned with Antifa might, like, make a good point about a thing, but, like, there are, behind whatever kind of boogeymen we build up, and that goes vice versa, but, like, if, there are things that we do agree on, it's just, if I came out and said, like, oh, well, some of my cool Antifa friends, like, that's it, I'm over.
Yeah. And I've some of those points that they make, it's like, I believe that a lot of that is going to be integrated in, I believe that some sort of benevolent government is right around the corner, and I believe that we're going to be seeing several of their talking points. I'm not going to say which ones, but it's like a lot of them just want to see corruption go away.
Yeah.
And animals taken care of, stuff like that.
Yeah,
And I
like
think we're going to be seeing a lot of it. And then a lot of people are going to be happy on both sides of the aisle when
yeah,
things
there's
play
so
out.
I've been like I've been reading a lot of like anarchist type writings because I'm trying, I want to not sound dumb when I'm
Yeah.
deep undercover. Like I want to, sound like, ah, yes, yeah, I definitely know that term that you're talking about. I too have read books. But like this one of the biggest things that these writers talk about is like the concept their like concept of, so what we know as anarchy is just like chaos and like just complete, everything's on fire all the time, there's no rules. But like the way that a bunch of these writers have framed it is it's not that it's chaos, it's just that it's like so instead of like a centralized government, it would be more like, individual communities would kind of like set their rules for like, this is how, these are the things that we think are important here, and these are the rules that we want to enforce here, and we'll like, do that amongst our little group, and like your little group, you can do something completely different, and then like, we can trade amongst each other. We don't have to all be sort of under one like set of rules. So it's anarchy in the sense that like it's this patchwork of like different groups of people deciding for themselves what they value. And I'm reading that and I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, that
that
brings us
sounds
full
that
circle
sounds
because
great. Like that sounds incredible.
that brings us full circle in what we're describing as what's happening in the Q movement right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where this decentralization and this walking away from authority, that's anarchy as would be described in
Uh-huh.
their books.
Yeah, it's just like there's there are things that like fundamentally reasonable people I think all agree on. It's just all of the layers of abstraction and like,
Hmm.
well, I don't agree with how you plan to get to this point, so you're
Yeah, yeah.
wrong. Like it's so much more complicated than that, and I mean, Twitter is obviously not the best place for like in-depth nuanced discussion because character limits.
Hmm.
But I don't really see it's like almost like it's like, traitorous if you suggest like, well, maybe we can agree on some things. Like that's not allowed.
Some of my best conversations have happened with people across the aisle who
Mm.
we've just discussed like how we've had our heads bitten off by going against the norm.
Mm.
Like for me, it was saying um, when I was watching one of the BLM videos where it seemed like it was mid-ride, it was at night, and it was just a bunch of people in the streets dancing. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is touching. This to me, this looks like the deep state agenda backfiring and failing. That
Yeah.
they're not going to get the chaos that they want. And man, did I get my head bit off by a bunch of right wingers. And the guy across in the Twitter thread, he's sharing examples too where the there's individuals battling the mob in every aspect of life.
Yeah.
And this is very like a sort. It kind of leads to is rooted in some Nietzschean philosophy, where
Mm.
the mob herd mentality just doesn't like the individual thinking for
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and that leads to a whole another topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this has been great. I think I should stop this. I think we've got so much material here.
Yeah.
It's going to take me 2 weeks to edit this and everything. I'd love to have you back on the show.
Oh, I would love to come back.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alyse, and I'll make sure to add add some info in the description
Oh,
here.
yeah,
Uh,
let me plug, can I plug the can I plug my URL to the
Please, yeah, I
Okay.
honestly was about to ask you.
So, all right. So the Great Awakening wiki is at, and I'm gonna have to spell it out because it's one of those funky. It's not like a .com, but it's mindpowered/wiki. It's MINDPOWE dot period whatever RED/wiki. It's WIKI.
And what's your Twitter handle again?
It is at Alyse, ALYSE, awakened.
That's just awesome. Thank you so much. This has been a huge success,
This has been
and
great.
I hope for those listening, which hopefully will be
There's gonna be so many. All of
yeah.
our thousands of adoring fans.
If anybody wants to get involved in either of our projects, as we've already discussed, we'd be happy to have you. So Godspeed and all that jazz. Okay.